The silence was deafening as I watched the confetti fall, each colorful piece a mocking reminder of my shattered dreams. They were toasting to new beginnings, to a future I was now excluded from, their laughter echoing like nails on a chalkboard in my mind. My own brother, the person who was supposed to be my rock, raised his glass, a cruel smile playing on his lips as his eyes met mine across the crowded room. In that instant, the world tilted on its axis, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't just a stumble, it was a calculated push, a deliberate act of betrayal that would forever alter the course of my life. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you considered family, subscribe now so we can share our stories and support each other. Because true family sticks together, no matter what. It all started innocently enough, a few weeks before the holidays. My name is Riley, and I had been pouring my heart and soul into my small business, a curated online boutique specializing in handcrafted goods. It wasn't easy. I'd sunk every penny I had into it, working tirelessly day and night, sacrificing my social life and any semblance of a normal routine. But I believed in my vision, in the unique products I was offering, and in the potential for something truly special. My brother Ethan had always been outwardly supportive, offering words of encouragement and even occasionally helping me pack orders. He knew how much this meant to me, how much I'd risk to make it a reality. So, when he started making subtle jabs about my unrealistic ambitions and the embarrassment I was supposedly causing our family, I initially brushed it off as sibling rivalry, a misguided attempt at tough love. Riley, he'd say, his voice laced with a condescension I'd never heard before, maybe it's time to face reality. Not everyone is meant to be a CEO. Some people are better off with a steady paycheck and a 9-to-5 job. At first, I tried to reason with him, explaining my plans for expansion, the positive feedback I was receiving from customers, and the steady growth I was experiencing. But he wouldn't listen, his eyes glazed over with a mixture of pity and disdain. The comments grew more frequent, more pointed, often delivered in front of our parents or other family members, each one chipping away at my confidence and leaving me feeling increasingly isolated. Then came the final blow, the invitation to his New Year's Eve party, followed by his whispered words slurred with alcohol. "Do us all a favor, Riley. Just skip it this year. Your life is kind of an embarrassment right now." That night, I felt the familiar sting of tears welling up in my eyes. I retreated to my small apartment, the festive decorations suddenly feeling like taunts. I spent hours replaying his words in my head, each syllable a fresh wound. Was he right? Was I a failure? Was I destined to remain a disappointment in the eyes of my family? Doubt gnawed at me, threatening to consume me whole. But beneath the surface of my despair, a flicker of defiance began to ignite. I refused to let his negativity define me. I would prove him wrong. I would show him, and everyone else who doubted me, that I was capable of achieving my dreams, no matter how improbable they seemed. I wiped away my tears, took a deep breath, and started making a plan. I knew I couldn't confront him directly. He was too entrenched in his own arrogance to listen to reason. Instead, I decided to focus on my business, pouring all my energy into making it a success. I researched new marketing strategies, streamlined my operations, and reached out to potential investors. I worked harder than ever before, fueled by a burning desire to prove myself, to silence the voices of doubt, and to emerge from this setback stronger and more resilient than ever. The person I trusted most was one of them. His fiancée, the woman I'd always considered a friend, the person I confided in about my struggles and aspirations, was in on it too. I remember venting to her about Ethan's negativity one afternoon over coffee. She'd listened attentively, offering words of comfort and support, telling me to ignore his nonsense and to keep pursuing my dreams. But as I later discovered, her kindness was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade, a calculated attempt to lull me into a false sense of security. She was feeding information back to Ethan, using my vulnerabilities against me, all while pretending to be my confidant. This realization hit me like a punch to the gut, shattering my trust and leaving me feeling utterly betrayed. How could they both be so cruel, so manipulative? What had I done to deserve this? The answers eluded me, but the questions fueled my resolve. I wouldn't let them break me. I would use their betrayal as motivation, as fuel to propel me forward. I would turn their negativity into a source of strength, and I would emerge from this ordeal victorious. They had underestimated me, and they were about to learn that underestimating Riley was the biggest mistake they could ever make. The weeks that followed were a blur of frantic activity and quiet desperation. I doubled down on my efforts, spending countless hours poring over spreadsheets, crafting marketing campaigns, and reaching out to influencers in my niche. I attended networking events, forcing myself to smile and make small talk while battling a constant undercurrent of anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself, fearing it would be Ethan, ready to deliver another blow. Every notification felt like a potential threat. Sleep became a luxury I could barely afford, my nights filled with restless tossing and turning, haunted by visions of failure and the crushing weight of my brother's disapproval. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, each wall closing in on me, suffocating me with the reminders of my dwindling resources and mounting debts. I tried to confide in my parents, hoping for some semblance of support, but they dismissed my concerns as sibling squabbles and urged me to make peace with Ethan. "He's just looking out for you, Riley," my mother would say, her voice laced with a familiar blend of exasperation and disappointment. "He wants you to be happy and successful. Maybe you should listen to him." Their words, though well-intentioned, stung like salt in an open wound. I felt invisible, unheard, as if my dreams and aspirations were insignificant compared to Ethan's seemingly perfect life. The financial strain was relentless. Sales had slowed to a trickle, and my savings were dwindling rapidly. I cut back on every expense imaginable, sacrificing basic necessities in a desperate attempt to keep my business afloat. Ramen noodles became my staple food, and I spent my evenings huddled under blankets, trying to conserve electricity. The weight of my debt pressed down on me, a suffocating burden that threatened to crush me. I applied for loans but was repeatedly rejected, my lack of collateral and shaky credit history working against me. Desperation gnawed at me, whispering insidious suggestions in my ear. "Maybe Ethan was right," the voice would say. "Maybe you're not cut out for this. Maybe it's time to give up." I fought back, clinging to the memory of my initial vision, the passion that had driven me to start this venture in the first place. I refused to let his negativity extinguish my flame, but the struggle was relentless, and the doubt lingered, a constant companion in my darkest hours. I tried to talk to Sarah, Ethan's fiancée, seeking a friendly ear and a moment of respite from the storm. She listened patiently, nodding sympathetically as I poured out my heart, detailing my financial woes and the emotional toll Ethan's behavior was taking on me. She offered words of encouragement, reminding me of my strengths and urging me to stay strong. "You've got this, Riley," she'd say, her eyes filled with what seemed like genuine concern. "Don't let Ethan get you down. He can be a jerk sometimes, but he doesn't mean it." Her words provided temporary comfort, a brief reprieve from the relentless pressure. But little did I know, her sympathy was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated performance, a calculated move in a game I didn't even know I was playing. Every detail I shared with her was being relayed back to Ethan, used as ammunition against me, further fueling his campaign to undermine my confidence and sabotage my dreams. The isolation was almost unbearable. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of negativity, with no one to throw me a lifeline. My friends, caught up in their own lives, didn't understand the depth of my struggle. They offered platitudes and generic advice, but their words rang hollow, failing to penetrate the wall of despair that surrounded me. I longed for connection, for someone to truly see me, to understand the pain I was enduring. But I was alone, adrift in a world that seemed determined to see me fail. The sleepless nights continued, punctuated by nightmares of Ethan's mocking laughter and Sarah's false reassurances. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest, the weight of my situation pressing down on me like a physical force. I started to question my sanity, wondering if I was losing my grip on reality. Was I imagining things? Was Ethan really as malicious as I perceived him to be? Was Sarah truly betraying me, or was I simply paranoid? The doubt gnawed at me, eroding my confidence and blurring the lines between truth and illusion. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that Ethan and Sarah were working together to undermine me, to sabotage my dreams and crush my spirit. And I knew that I couldn't let them win. I had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim my life and prove them wrong. The seed of revenge had been planted, and it was beginning to take root, fueled by the pain of betrayal and the burning desire for justice. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday, shoved unceremoniously under my door. It was the final nail in the coffin, the undeniable proof that I had reached the absolute bottom. As I stared at the cold, official language, a wave of nausea washed over me, followed by a chilling sense of detachment. It wasn't just the loss of my apartment. It was the culmination of everything that had gone wrong, the crushing weight of failure bearing down on me. I sank to the floor, the paper slipping from my trembling fingers, and allowed myself to succumb to the despair that had been lurking beneath the surface for weeks. My vision blurred, and a sob escaped my lips, turning into a torrent of uncontrolled weeping. The walls seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with the reality of my situation. I was alone, broke, and about to be homeless. Ethan and Sarah had won. They had successfully dismantled my life, piece by piece, until nothing remained but ruins. I imagined them celebrating, toasting to their victory, reveling in my misery. The thought ignited a spark of rage within me, a fierce, burning ember that refused to be extinguished. I would not let them break me. I would not let their cruelty define me. I would rise from the ashes, stronger and more determined than ever before. The tears gradually subsided, replaced by a cold, steely resolve. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and stood up, my legs shaky but firm. It was time to stop wallowing in self-pity and start fighting back. I wouldn't confront them directly, not yet. Instead, I would focus on rebuilding my life, on reclaiming my dreams, on proving them wrong. I needed a plan, a strategy that would not only restore my business but also expose their treachery and hold them accountable for their actions. I started by packing my belongings, sorting through the remnants of my former life. As I folded clothes and boxed up books, I stumbled upon a small, unassuming notebook tucked away in the back of a drawer. It was a journal I had started years ago, filled with sketches, ideas, and aspirations. As I flipped through the pages, I rediscovered the passion that had driven me to start my business in the first place. The spark of inspiration ignited, rekindling my hope and fueling my determination. I realized that I still had something to offer, something unique and valuable. I just needed to find a way to share it with the world. I spent the next few days couchsurfing at friends' apartments, desperately searching for a new place to live. But with my limited funds and tarnished credit history, my options were severely limited. Each rejection felt like another blow, chipping away at my resolve. I started to question whether I would ever escape this downward spiral, whether I was destined to remain trapped in this cycle of poverty and despair. One evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from a local entrepreneur advertising a competition for small business owners. The prize was a grant of $10,000 and a year of free mentorship. It seemed like a long shot, but I decided to apply, pouring my heart and soul into the application, detailing my struggles, my vision, and my unwavering commitment to my business. I knew it was a slim chance, but I had nothing to lose. As I waited for the results, I continued to work tirelessly, exploring new marketing strategies, streamlining my operations, and networking with other entrepreneurs. I refused to let my circumstances define me. I would not be a victim. I would be a survivor. Then one morning, I received an email. I held my breath as I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was from the competition organizers. I had been selected as one of the finalists. A wave of relief washed over me, followed by a surge of adrenaline. This was my chance, my opportunity to turn things around, to prove Ethan and Sarah wrong, to reclaim my life. I knew I had to give it everything I had. I spent the next few weeks preparing for the final presentation, honing my pitch and practicing my delivery. I researched the judges, anticipating their questions and crafting compelling answers. I was determined to impress them, to show them that I was worthy of their investment. The day of the presentation arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. As I stood on the stage, facing the panel of judges, I took a deep breath and began to speak. I shared my story, my struggles, my vision, and my unwavering commitment to my business. I spoke from the heart, pouring out my passion and my determination. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. The judges smiled and nodded, their eyes filled with admiration. I knew I had made an impact. A few days later, I received the news. I had won the competition. The grant money and the mentorship would be enough to save my business, to get me back on my feet, to prove Ethan and Sarah wrong. But the victory was bittersweet. I knew that simply succeeding wasn't enough. I needed to expose their treachery, to hold them accountable for their actions, to prevent them from hurting anyone else. The plan had begun to form in my mind, a carefully calculated strategy that would bring them down and reveal their true nature to the world. I smiled, a cold, determined smile. The game was far from over. It was just beginning. I smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that didn't feel forced or plastered on. They thought they had broken me. They believed I was defeated. But the truth was, winning that competition had given me more than just money and mentorship. It had given me the one thing they thought they had stolen: hope. And with hope came a burning desire for justice, a need to make them understand the depth of their betrayal. I knew I couldn't just confront them. I needed to expose them, to reveal their true colors to everyone they had deceived. My plan started small, almost innocently. I began documenting everything. Every conversation, every email, every text message. I knew that direct evidence would be crucial, and I wasn't going to rely on hearsay or speculation. I reactivated an old voice recorder, a relic from a college journalism class, and discreetly kept it running during my interactions with Sarah. I needed to catch her in her lies, to record her duplicity, to expose her role in Ethan's scheme. It felt risky, like I was walking a tightrope with no safety net, but the thought of holding them accountable fueled my determination. There were close calls, moments when I thought Sarah suspected something. One afternoon, as we were having coffee, she leaned forward and asked, "You seem different, Riley, more focused. What's going on?" My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to remain calm. "Just trying to stay positive," I replied, offering a weak smile. "You know, focusing on the competition and all that." She studied me for a moment, her eyes narrowed, then shrugged. "Well, whatever it is, it suits you." I breathed a silent sigh of relief as she turned her attention back to her latte. That was too close. I needed to be more careful. I started researching the laws surrounding privacy and recording devices, making sure I wasn't crossing any legal lines. I learned about one-party consent states, where only one person involved in a conversation needs to be aware that it's being recorded. Luckily, my state was one of them. But I knew that even with legal protection, the evidence I gathered had to be irrefutable, beyond any reasonable doubt. I also started paying closer attention to Ethan's online activity, monitoring his social media accounts, his professional profiles, and any public records I could find. I was looking for a pattern, a weakness, something that would give me leverage. It was tedious work, hours spent sifting through mountains of data, but I knew that the devil was in the details. One evening, as I was scrolling through Ethan's LinkedIn profile, I noticed something odd. He had listed a consulting project that seemed suspiciously similar to a business plan I had shared with him months ago, before our falling out. The dates lined up perfectly, and the description was almost identical to my original proposal. My blood ran cold. He had stolen my idea, my intellectual property, and was passing it off as his own. This was more than just sabotage, it was theft. And it gave me the ammunition I needed. I consulted with a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in intellectual property law. I showed her the evidence I had gathered, the recorded conversations with Sarah, the stolen business plan, and the documented instances of Ethan's interference. She listened intently, her expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence I presented. "This is a strong case, Riley," she said finally. "You have a clear claim for copyright infringement and tortious interference. We can sue him for damages and seek an injunction to prevent him from using your stolen ideas." I felt a surge of vindication. Finally, I had a way to fight back, to hold them accountable for their actions. But I wasn't just interested in money or legal victories. I wanted to expose them, to reveal their true nature to the world. I wanted to make sure that no one else would fall victim to their deceit. The lawyer explained the legal process, the depositions, the discovery, the potential for a trial. It was a daunting prospect, but I was determined to see it through. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was prepared to fight for what was right. I spent the next few weeks working closely with my lawyer, preparing the lawsuit and gathering additional evidence. I subpoenaed Ethan's company records, demanding access to his financial statements, his client contracts, and his internal communications. I also reached out to some of Ethan's former colleagues and clients, hoping to find witnesses who could corroborate my claims. The stress was immense, the pressure almost unbearable, but I refused to back down. I was driven by a burning desire for justice, a need to make them understand the consequences of their actions. As the lawsuit progressed, I noticed a change in Sarah's behavior. She became more distant, more guarded, avoiding my calls and canceling our coffee dates. I knew she was worried, that she sensed the walls closing in. But I didn't let up. I continued to gather evidence, to build my case, to prepare for the final confrontation. The anticipation was almost unbearable. I knew that the day of reckoning was coming, the day when I would finally expose their treachery and reclaim my life. And I was ready. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Sarah, sensing the impending doom, finally reached out. A text. "Riley, we need to talk. Can we meet?" The perfect bait. I responded casually, "Sure, same cafe as always." Inside, I was a coiled spring, every nerve ending screaming. This was it, the pieces were in place. I had spent weeks meticulously crafting this moment, anticipating every move, every possible outcome. I knew they underestimated me, saw me as weak, broken. That was their fatal mistake. They had no idea the storm that was about to break. I arrived at the cafe early, choosing a table with a clear view of the entrance. I wanted to see her face when she realized the trap had sprung. The cafe was bustling, filled with the usual lunchtime crowd, oblivious to the drama that was about to unfold. The irony wasn't lost on me. Just weeks ago, I was one of them, a nameless face in the crowd, struggling to stay afloat. Now I was about to orchestrate the downfall of two people who thought they were untouchable. Sarah arrived, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously around the cafe. She spotted me and forced a weak smile. "Hey," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," I replied, my voice calm and even. "What's on your mind?" She hesitated, taking a deep breath. "I know about the lawsuit, Riley." My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't flinch. "Oh, do you?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "What do you know about it?" She squirmed in her seat, avoiding my gaze. "Ethan told me everything. He said you're trying to ruin him." "And what do you think?" I asked, pressing her. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "I don't know what to think, Riley. I don't want to get involved." "You already are involved, Sarah," I said, my voice hardening. "You were involved from the beginning." Her eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "I know everything, Sarah. I know about the lies, the sabotage, the stolen business plan. I have proof." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, innocuous-looking USB drive. "This contains everything, Sarah. Every conversation, every email, every document, everything you and Ethan did to try and destroy me." She stared at the USB drive, her face draining of color. "No," she whispered. "That's not true." "Oh, it's true, Sarah," I said, my voice cold and unwavering. "And I'm about to share it with the world." I pulled out my phone and opened my email app. I had already drafted an email to every media outlet in the city, along with Ethan's clients, his investors, and his family. All that was left was to hit send. Sarah lunged across the table, grabbing my wrist. "Don't do this, Riley," she screamed. "Please, you'll ruin us." I looked at her, my eyes filled with a mixture of pity and contempt. "You should have thought about that before you tried to ruin me," I said. I pried her fingers off my wrist and took a deep breath. "This is for everyone you've hurt, Sarah. This is for every dream you've crushed. This is for justice." My finger hovered over the send button. The cafe seemed to fade away, the noise and chatter dissolving into a dull hum. It was just me, Sarah, and the weight of everything that had led to this moment. One click, that's all it would take. But I hesitated. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to beg. I wanted her to understand the full extent of her betrayal. "Tell me, Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Why did you do it? Why did you betray me?" She started to cry, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she sobbed. "I was jealous, I was insecure, I thought you were better than me." "And that justified destroying my life?" I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. She shook her head, her body racked with sobs. "No," she said. "I know it was wrong. I'm so sorry, Riley." Please just give me a chance to make it right. I stared at her, my face expressionless. I had waited so long for this moment for this apology, but now that it was here, it felt hollow, meaningless. The damage was done, the trust was broken. There was no going back. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. It was time. I steeled myself, preparing to unleash the storm. My finger tightened on the send button. But then, a voice I hadn't expected. A voice that made my blood run cold. Riley, don't. I opened my eyes and turned to see Ethan standing behind Sarah, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. He had heard everything. He knew what was about to happen, and he was desperate to stop it. Please, he begged, his voice trembling. Don't do this. We can work this out. I'll give you anything you want. I looked at him, my eyes filled with contempt. It's too late for that, Ethan, I said. The game is over. He took a step closer, his hand outstretched. No, Riley, please. Think about what you're doing. You'll ruin everything, I smirked. That's the point, Ethan. Ethan's pleas were pathetic, a last-ditch attempt to salvage his crumbling empire. But I was done negotiating. This wasn't about money or revenge. It was about justice, about preventing them from ever hurting anyone again. My finger pressed down, sending the email into the digital void. A second later, a confirmation ping echoed from my phone. It was done. The truth was out there. I looked up and watched as the color drained completely from Ethan's face. Eyes darted around the cafe, as if searching for an escape route. Sarah was still sobbing, her body shaking uncontrollably. The silence was deafening, broken only by her muffled cries. Then the first notification arrived. A news alert flashed across my phone screen. Local entrepreneur accused of intellectual property theft and sabotage. The dominoes had begun to fall. Within minutes, the cafe was buzzing with activity. Phones were ringing, whispers were spreading, and all eyes were on Ethan and Sarah. Ethan tried to say something to deny the allegations, but his voice was drowned out by the rising tide of disapproval. People were pulling out their phones, recording him, taking pictures. The humiliation was complete. He grabbed Sarah's hand and dragged her out of the cafe, their faces etched with despair. I watched them go, my heart pounding in my chest. The initial rush of adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a strange sense of calm. It was over. They were exposed. Their lives were ruined. Later that day, the story exploded. Every major news outlet in the city was covering the scandal. Ethan's company stock plummeted, his clients deserted him, and his reputation was shattered beyond repair. Sarah was fired from her job, ostracized by her friends, and branded as an accomplice. Their carefully constructed world had crumbled around them, leaving them with nothing but shame and regret. The lawsuit proceeded, and the evidence was overwhelming. Ethan was found guilty of copyright infringement and tortious interference. He was ordered to pay a hefty sum in damages and was permanently barred from using my stolen business plan. Sarah, though not directly involved in the theft, was found liable for her role in the sabotage. She was ordered to pay a smaller fine and was required to attend ethics training. But the legal penalties were nothing compared to the social consequences they faced. They became pariahs, shunned by their community, haunted by their past. They lost everything. I just smiled. The satisfaction wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a feeling of joy or triumph, but rather a sense of closure, of finally being able to move on. The scars of their betrayal would always be there, but they no longer controlled my life. I had taken back my power, reclaimed my future. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that revenge wasn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a way of holding people accountable for their actions, of preventing them from inflicting further harm. It's a way of protecting yourself and others from those who would seek to exploit and destroy. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.